Donald Trump hates trade deficits. So we've made 5 videos, believe it or not, on the subject, and one related kind of funny video, asking the question, are trade deficits really a big problem? In this video, we're going to summarize the others quickly to give you a sense of how everything kind of, fits together. We started by pointing out that while most of the world is lower income, still developing, the number one large economy in the world, the United States, 4 of the top 7 large economies, the G7, and in fact, most advanced economies have trade deficits. The point? If the successful economies mostly have trade deficits, are trade deficits really that bad? Then we looked at the fact that trade deficits actually decrease during recessions, increase during economic expansions. Again, if trade deficits are so bad, why do they grow during good times? That doesn't sound bad. Of course, this reminded us of, that's right, the New York Yankees. The Yankees strike out a lot, more than most teams in Major League Baseball. Now that's bad. But they also win a lot of games, more than all but 2 teams last year. And a big reason why they win is because they hit more home runs than anyone else. As even the great Babe Ruth said, strikeouts come with home runs. So while strikeouts aren't a good thing, they also aren't the cause of losing. They're a result of winning. Maybe trade deficits are the same, we thought. If wealthy countries have them, and they rise in good times, maybe it's because prosperity itself, having more money to spend, can be a cause of trade deficits. To examine this point, we started by looking at Germany, a high-income country which, unlike the U.S., has a large trade surplus. We found that in terms of trade, tariffs, that sort of thing, the difference between Germany and the U.S. is actually small, while financially, the difference is huge. The Germans save more, borrow less, and spend a lot less than Americans. So when you look at it, the German trade surplus seems to have way more to do with spending habits than tariffs or trade policy. Then we looked at China. We started by saying that the statistics show that low-income countries, developing countries like China, are more likely to have a trade surplus than higher-income countries. Looking at China specifically, 40 years ago, China really had no imports or exports. It was just extremely poor. But when you're poor, you have to sell to those who actually have money, so you export. China's exports grew, and so did its imports, but imports grew more slowly, which makes sense because, they're poor. They don't have as much money to spend. Even today, China's per capita GDP is less than 25% of America's, and its savings rate is 7 times higher. Think about how much America's trade deficit would shrink if it had 75% less money to spend on imports. So again, as opposed to thinking, something unfair or unusual is happening, it looks like China's trade surplus is a kind of natural thing related to how much money a developing country has to spend. Finally, and maybe best of all, we looked at oil, where the U.S. became the world's largest producer, and the U.S. import bill shrank by 60%, or $210 billion, from 2011 to 2017. That's the greatest deficit reduction campaign ever. Way better than tariffs. So the U.S. trade deficit fell over that time period, right? Wrong. It actually rose because the U.S. took the money and went out and bought a bunch of cell phones and cars and other stuff. So think about that. Oil was America's number 1 import problem for decades. America cut it by more than half, and yet the trade deficit didn't decrease because money was spent on other stuff. That tells you something about trade deficits and spending. We're going to close with something technical. A bit nerdy, but we'll keep it simple and quick. This is the national income equation, which is how economists measure an economy and growth. But remember, an equation doesn't necessarily tell you cause and effect, which is the dog and which is the tail wagged by the dog. Now this is one point of view, that the trade deficit is one of the main causes of economic growth. If you want to grow more, have a trade surplus, so goes the thinking. What we're saying is that the evidence indicates that this interpretation, that the trade deficit is not the cause, but the result of these other variables, is closer to the truth. Like that thing we were saying about strikeouts not causing the Yankees to lose, but being a result of hitting home runs and winning. The U.S. trade deficit is not the cause of, lost growth, but the result of higher growth and more spending. Now, for those who might disagree, you might want to ask, after more than a year of tariffs, why hasn't the U.S. trade deficit really decreased? Perhaps more importantly, we're about to have an even better opportunity to test these ideas. We have a president who's launched a concerted effort to reduce the trade deficit, and we have major agreements in place aimed at accomplishing that objective. Will America's trade deficit fall? If so, will that actually help the economy? Will it be a win for the economy? Stay tuned. It'll be interesting to watch. Now we have videos on each of these topics. So for more background, please go to theglobaldashboard.com. If you don't see videos on other trade topics, well, chances are they're on the way as we continue to provide material that explains how trade really works. This is Dan Joseph with The Global Dashboard. Thanks for watching.